Hey everybody, this is the Afterthoughts where we're talking about the sermon and some of our thoughts that we had during the sermon, some other things that went on. And so today's sermon was on Psalm 107. Nick brought the sermon, beginning with it amused me the introduction about faulty memories. We talk a lot about virtue, so immediately I think about that's one of the first things I teach about prudence is people who have excessive memories that they just make stuff up, and like that's how you led the sermon. That apparently you even said it was epidemic in our country, like people remembering things that didn't happen. Uh,
And it's weird because it always benefits the person with, telling the story. It's
oh,
like,
indeed, indeed, and it was funny. This didn't happen during the sermon, but afterwards we were talking about somebody having a whole lot of grandchildren, great grandchildren, and in my mind I had gotten that turned around, and I think I had doubled the number. So when I was mentioning this to somebody, they're like, "No," and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, they said," and I realized that's not what they said. So it's a
it's,
genuine vice, like it's a problem of remembering things that didn't happen, which relates with us taking credit for what God is
so
doing.
yeah, a
Like,
little different between a genuine mistake and actually just, lying. Let's
well,
just be honest.
true, true, but there is that element that if we have, and it goes back to the language of virtue, if we have this bad habit of remembering things that didn't happen or switching things around,
Right.
those
Yeah.
kinds of things, that leads us to genuinely believing that we did these things and it wasn't God. Like it's not correct in our minds. It does
Right.
not correspond to reality. Which again, we wouldn't necessarily think on that, but it seems like a bigger issue than what we realize. Um, and I think also appreciate at the beginning, like you went into your testimony, just kind of like how God has changed you around, and you keep it in general. But I think that's why when we're reading the Psalms,
I have to keep it general. I can't tell specifics,
well,
or people will just not look at me the same. I think that's a good thing.
there is some
Should
of
br-
that, but I think this is why when we're reading the Psalms, this is, and now like I said, we're going to be moving into the teens this week, the hundred and teens this week, and after reading so many of these Psalms, there is that constant remember. You have this regular remembrance, and even in Sunday school, I was thinking about how it connected that we were discussing about the Lord's Supper, do these things in remembrance, and they would have all these feasts because we forget. We tend to be a forgetful people, or we'll remember it the wrong way.
Right.
And so I think it's good sometimes, and that's why sharing the testimony, walking through these things, remembering what God has done, and make sure that there is a sense, make sure we got the story straight. We're giving credit where credit's due, which is major point of where you're going with this. So you also brought up about pastors being held to. I wrote down supernatural standards, but I don't think that was correct.
No, no.
Um,
I said, as soon as you get the title pastor slapped on you, all of a sudden you're deemed with some supernatural power to be able to do all things
that's what
everywhere.
it
So
was.
yeah.
Yes. So I think that was funny because you talked about that, and you also talked about uh, elsewhere where people get upset like, oh, the pastor's wearing shorts, and because I think you came in this morning because
Wearing shorts because I was doing a
you
baptism,
did
yeah.
baptism, so you had the shorts. I saw it, and I mean, I knew. I was like,
And
"Oh, yeah."
literally somebody said to me, "Oh, that's a bold choice." Now granted, it was my own daughter, but she was like, "That was a bold choice." So, like,
Well, it is a little odd, out of character. You not what you're normally doing, and, to be able to specify, like, "Oh, we have a baptism date." Like, I knew that, like,
personally,
so
I don't wanna specify. I would rather just people get their little case.
well, and I think it's funny because, again, some of the afterthoughts as we're talking about this, like, I remember when I wore shorts out in my own front yard as a pastor, and I got called down for
Isn't
that,
it
like,
ridiculous?
wearing
S
shorts. Pastor shouldn't be in shorts.
What people think is just
Uh
insane to me.
And even Joel got called down for that as a little kid, so he would have been younger than 8, and he was wearing shorts at church, and we got busted for that one. They were like people were like, "Isn't he a little old to be in shorts?" And I'm like, "What in the world?"
Do you understand? I mean, you know me well enough to know that this isn't a joke, that if somebody started giving me actual static for wearing shorts, that I would go put on ranger panties. And for those who don't know what ranger panties are, they're the really short, silky shorts. I would rock those everywhere I went
See,
if it really came down to it.
I knew what those were because you've used that as a sermon illustration
Yeah.
before. So I remembered
I would
correctly.
do that, like,
I
just to
remembered.
prove not to prove the point to, like, be but, like, to say, "Look, like, we're focusing on the things that don't matter," but for the sermon, like, it is the idea that the standards in which a pastor is held to is insane. No person can actually attain that.
I basically got written up at a church because we had a teenager that was wanting to come to church, but they felt uncomfortable because they didn't have dress clothes, so they were coming in blue jeans on a Sunday morning. Now, this is a church that was a little bit more formal, so I told them, I was like, "Well, I'll wear jeans, kind of like I do. I'll wear jeans that morning to help them out." And it was ugly what I
That's
got.
amazing.
I
See
what happened,
see, I'm proud of you for that moment.
and
Just for the record, I'm proud of you.
but I bring all this up because again, some of the thoughts as I think I've been pastor long enough that that kind of fear or feelings you get when worried about what people think,
Yeah.
that's been seared off years ago because of being in that pastoral role.
Well, let's be clear, though, that I brought that up to then roll into the same standard in which
Right.
Christians are held to, and
Mhm.
I knew that if I used myself as the example first, that when I turned it to them, they would be able to relate to that and go, "Oh, you're right, that is a high standard," and
Right. I was getting there because
no, sorry.
part of me I had written on here. I was like, "What is your point for doing this?" And then you move into that. The Christians have their standards. The unbelievers are holding us to a standard, and to recognize, that issue of hypocrisy and what are we focused on? And I think as you were, you hit that, and we're not trying to play. I think the way I wrote it, if you play the holier than thou, you do yourself a disservice and others, which I think is what we end up doing. We try to um, be something we're not,
Right.
which I think is what even leads into that remembering things the way they don't happen because you're pretending so long that
You don't
you
even
forget
like,
what is
there's
really
people
real.
that don't even know when they're pretending anymore.
So, um, so you did mention at the very end because there was a couple times there, like where the key idea for this is how do we talk about God and His actions, and do we give Him this credit and not live in false memories? Again, I'm not sure if you said it that way. That's what I wrote down, but that could be because as I was thinking on that, it goes back to if we live in pretense and we live with this false sense of who we are, we're not. And there is that sense it wasn't our power because we were the ones doing that.
Right.
We live in that falseness. So I kind of recognized, that's why living genuinely in that relationship with Christ, that's where when we remember what he did. We remember how we responded. And you did communicate those ideas. Like we do have to submit. We do have to respond to that. But it also goes back to, as much as we've grown over the years, had it not been for the Spirit convicting, the Spirit calling us, we would never have even chosen that. It would never
Right.
have even,
Yeah.
wouldn't have been an issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's an element that you know, like, for myself, I do strive to be a better man, I do strive to be a better Christian. I mean, I do put the work in, but in all of it, I don't get to take the credit for it. I mean, yeah, I put the work in, but, I mean, like you just said, it's all God the entire time.
And that's why there is that part on us because when God looks at us and He says, "Well done," there has to be some effort
Yeah,
on our part,
yeah.
but we shouldn't be patting ourselves on the back, which I think is the essence within the sermon. That once we start doing that, we have misaligned, we have misunderstood who's really the one bringing these ultimate changes.
And if Christians adopt this, and I don't know if I said this, but I should have. If Christians adopt this mentality and this way of living this out our faith, then nobody can call us hypocrites.
Hmm.
And the reason they can't call us hypocrites is because we're no longer taking credit for things that aren't ours. It is a total utter acceptance of our shortcomings and what he has ultimately done for us.
Hmm.
So it's impossible to call us hypocrites because we're not making claims towards anything for ourselves.
Hmm.
And so I think that was the ultimate of what I was trying to get to. But I didn't want it to be like, oh, us poor Christians, everybody calls us hypocrites. It was like, yo, you need to, as Christians, this is how we need to behave. This is how we need to act. This
Hmm.
is how we need to, honor him by giving him that credit.
Right. Well, Nick, I appreciate it and looking forward to next week.
All right. Me too.